Diane Jones had gone missing. Where could she be?
Diane Jones was a professional woman, very middle class, well-to-do, respectable. Her husband, Robert Jones, was a well-respected local doctor.
They have
a stormy relationship.
Thank you, dear.
Oh, Diane, you know you want to.
Stop it!
She's dead. Nobody's been charged, nobody's been convicted. Someone's got away with it.
It's very Midsummer Murders, the Diana Jones case. It's thatched cottages and roses round the door. Not the sort of place you expect something like that to happen.
She wasn't a very typical murder victim. This was different because it was a sort of very idyllic setting.
Of all the unsolved murder cases, this one is unique. For 40 years, police hunting the killer of Diane Jones have said that their only suspect was hiding in plain sight. 3 times they submitted evidence seeking to charge her husband, the respectable local GP Robert Jones, with the murder. Each time they were told their evidence was not strong enough.
It is possible for police to become fixated on the wrong person. It's happened before. They become zeroed in on a particular person and they couldn't see any other possibilities.
So what happened 40 years ago to set these extraordinary events in motion?
When Robert Jones was prime suspect that Essex police had for the murder of his wife, perhaps it was somebody else.
"50 miles from central London, Coggeshall is a quaint town of 4,000 people in Essex. The highlight of the year, held every July, is the Coggeshall Summer Carnival. It's been a prosperous farming area since medieval times. There are houses here on sale today for several £1,000,000. This could be described as quintessential Little England, which is why such a brutal murder shook the community to its foundations. Back in 1983, in a rambling former farmhouse on the outskirts of the town, lived the local GP, Dr. Robert Jones, and his 35-year-old wife, Diane. On the night of Saturday, July the 23rd, the couple visited their favourite local pub, the Woolpack. The doctor said that they drove home, and Diane stepped out of the car.
I drink so I don't have to listen
You drink
to all
because
you.
you've got issues.
Then, in the next few moments, she simply vanished.
Robert Jones said that he took her home in the car to the home address where he went in to walk the dog, and when he came out she'd gone. What's clear is that she did get in the car at the pub for the short mile ride home.
Initially, the story started with a disappearance. Diane Jones had gone missing. Where could she be? It was rather odd circumstances because she was quite a sort of a middle class, living in a nice area. It wasn't your usual crime victim. And her husband, he was the doctor in the town, quite a respected figure. So there was a lot of interest in this story.
My name is Mike Baldry. I was a detective inspector on the Diane Jones murder inquiry. It's a quiet little place, a charming little place, and everybody knew each other. It was a stunning effect on the whole village because of the intense publicity. All the newspapers, all the major television channels were interested in it.
At that time, there was a lot of investigation, a lot of inquiries into Diane's background, where she could be, people she might have gone off with, perhaps.
How are you treating this case at the moment?
As a missing person inquiry.
Have you found anything at all?
Not at the moment, no. All I will say to you is this, that the circumstances, as I understand them, surrounding her disappearance, give me cause for concern as to her welfare and safety.
She was a tortured soul, there's no doubt about it. I don't suppose I was worldly wise enough to pick up on the real internal turmoil that she was going through. My name's David Wiley, and I knew Diane Jones as a neighbour of mine, and we became friends. She was one of these people who was just, I don't know, she's a victim. Sad, terribly sad, victim, didn't deserve what happened to her. Not in a million years, no one deserved that. And the really frightening thing for me was that she predicted all of it.
Diane Jones began life far from the prosperous home counties, where her life ended. She was an only child, born in the tiny Lincolnshire village of Tealby.
I knew Diane very well through our teens, and we kept in touch over the years. At the time, it was a very rural village. There was little shops, 2 pubs, very friendly. It's one of those villages whereby everyone seems to look after each other, which is nice, and you tend to look after each other's back. The father, Sidney Walker, he had his own building company, and the mother, which is Phyllis Walker, she was a school teacher. She was a single child, and she was quite adventurous in many ways. Eventually, her father set her up as a hairdresser. There's a back room. They converted it so that she could run a little salon from her home, from their home. There's a few ladies about here which still remember their hair being done by Diane. Yeah, she knew a lot of people knew Diane better, yeah.
We would go to the local pub, the King's Head, and Diane was working behind the bar. A bright, smiley person that you greeted when you came in the pub. I count myself very lucky to have known Diane when I did. She met our friend, Ian, who was godfather to my son, and we got to know her much better then.
There was a chap who came to the pub. His name was Ian Hamilton. And he said, "That's a pretty girl." He says, looking at Diane, you see. And one of the other lads, he says he laid a wager. And he says, I bet you're scared to ask her out. Anyway, he did so, and strangely enough, about a matter of months after that, they were married.
They got married without telling people. They came round to see us to tell us that they were married, which was quite a surprise, but a nice one at the time. They moved down south. Ian got a job down there, and they both moved down. And to start with, they were very happy. She enjoyed parties and things. Ian was a very gentle person, and I think that was what she liked about him. He was her rock, I think.
After moving down from Lincolnshire to Essex, following her wedding, Diane had trained and found a job as a social worker. But the marriage with Ian Hamilton ended in divorce. Then one fateful day, Diane booked an appointment at the small GP surgery in Coggeshall.
Robert Jones met Diane when she presented herself at the surgery. They became an item, had an on-off relationship. Today that would be seen as unacceptable in the workplace, but of course this is 1983 and ethics were very different, but that is how they met, yeah, she was a patient at the surgery.
At the time they began their affair, Dr. Jones was into his second marriage and had 3 young children. He lived in a rambling former farmhouse known as Lee's Farm, just outside Coggeshall. Once the divorce was out of the way, in September 1982, he and Diane were married and had a baby daughter. But even in this small community, few seemed to know the doctor's new wife.
Back in the early 80s, he was my doctor. He was, extremely nice and pleasant guy. There was a family connection in as much as my 2 children were the same age as Dr. Jones's 2 children, and the wife used to take them on a Saturday to their riding school. But one never knew Mrs. Jones, from my point of view, just never knew her.
But by the time Diane disappeared in July 1983, in some circles the gossip had already started.
Drink, that's all.
Most of all at their local, the Woolpack Inn.
I'm not doing this.
They'd been married for less than a year, Dr. Jones for the 3rd time, but their relationship was known to be a stormy one.
Volatile. I say this without prejudice. Volatile. They have...
A stormy relationship.
Thank you, dear.
We had a lot of people come forward to give their recollection of Dr. Jones and Diane Jones. A lot of people knew that the relationship was a pretty volatile one because they had arguments in the local pubs in the village.
If they would fight in public, police began to wonder what might go on behind closed doors. Detectives began to look a little closer at Dr. Jones's account of the night Diane disappeared, Saturday, July the 23rd. They'd spent that night in the Woolpack, and the evening had ended in a blazing row.
You think I drink because I wanted to get drunk? I drink the way
He said he drove back to the farm, parked the car behind the house, and he never saw her again. She disappeared. He looked round for her and she was gone. But he didn't report that straight away. He waited for 9 days until he reported her missing. It wasn't until 9 days later that he went to the police and said, my wife is missing. And that's when the hunt started for Diane.
I remember trying to ring her, so I rang her quite regularly. And for a while, I wasn't getting through, or there was no answer at all.
There was mixed
evidence about what happened that night. There was an area of suspicion around it because of various calls and knowledge of the couple to Essex Police. Robert says that he drove all the way home. What's more in dispute is whether Diane got out of the car on the way home.
The distance from the Woolpack Inn to Lees Farm is less than a mile. A journey that should have taken no more than 4 minutes. But did the car stop on the way?
There are 2 witnesses that saw what they thought was Diane walking down the road a short distance from Lees Farm, going towards Lees Farm. Whether there was some sort of altercation in the car and she got out, whether she got out before she got the home address, we don't know. We never did establish that.
I had a phone call from Robert to say, did I know where she was? Had I seen her? Had I heard from her?
It was in the July of '83 when she was reported as missing. I'd been on holiday, and when I got back, she wasn't there. It was a strange one, but I'd knocked on the door a few times, and she'd just gone. And I never saw her again. I never saw her again.
I got the feeling in the town, and perhaps also from the police, that the person most of interest was Dr. Jones. They did talk to other people, they did follow a lot of avenues, but it all seemed to come back to Dr. Jones.
The whispering was, well, of course, her husband's done away with her, I knew a number of Essex CID officers at the time saying to me privately, you couldn't write it because it would have been libelous, but the police were saying, well, he's done it,
Robert did come and see me after she had been missing for some time to see if I had had any contact with her or anything. And that sort of surprised me at the time.
He was quite a cool character. I think that probably didn't help him in a way, that he came across as very calm, sometimes monosyllabic. Didn't seem, at least to the outside world, hugely stressed. I didn't see him doing any big interviews with posters saying, can you help me find Diane? There was none of that. Doesn't mean to say that he was involved, but it was a facet of how he was viewed, I think, probably by the police and locally.
Essex Police at the time viewed the way that Dr. Jones was behaving as odd. Diane and Robert had 2 cars. One was put up for sale shortly before Diane went missing and was sold afterwards. We did find that car was forensically examined at the time.
It was a Peugeot car that he used to go to the Woolpack. That night she disappeared. That was searched and forensically looked at. Nothing was found of any substance.
He'd said to me, if you hear from her, get in touch with me, but I didn't. But I didn't hear from him afterwards.
She was missing for a long time. I mean, she really was. I mean, it wasn't just a few days. This went on and on and on and on.
I was worried because time marched on and we didn't hear anything and didn't know anything. I don't think I wanted to ring Robert to find out if she was home, because if I had, I was going to be told that she wasn't.
Her body was found in a lay-by on the A1, just down from this bridge.
On September the 11th, 1983, 6 weeks after Diane Jones disappeared, a woman's body is discovered 50 miles from Coggeshall.
My name's Kelly Nibbs. I'm an investigator and I work on the cold case unit for Cambridgeshire Police. The body was found in a lay-by. There was a ditch just behind the lay-by which wasn't visible from the road, and that is where the body was found. In the field behind, there was the car jack which was found as well. We believe that the car jack was used as the murder weapon.
Obviously, with the Diane case, when they heard that a body was found of a female around the similar age, they would have pretty quickly been on the phone to Cambridgeshire Police that they've got this missing lady. Could the body potentially belong to her?
But instead of 35-year-old Diane Jones, the body turns out to be that of 36-year-old Janice Weston.
Janice Weston was an unlikely murder victim in many ways. She was a very successful, quite glamorous professional woman. She was a lawyer. The circumstances of Diane Jones' disappearance had some similarities. Like Janice, she was a professional woman, very middle class, well-to-do, respectable. Obviously, the two police forces had a good look at, any possible links.
It is unusual to have two murders with similar circumstances. The ladies are of a similar age, and the locations aren't that far apart. It's very unusual, pretty much unheard of.
Police now knew they were seeking a murderer. But had he killed one woman or two? As summer turned into autumn, Diane Jones's whereabouts remained a mystery. Detectives scoured the country for clues.
The police said that anyone in Diane's phone book or whatever, please contact us for elimination purposes. I was obviously in the phone book, so I did. And that's when a detective from Coggeshall came to see me.
In Coggeshall itself, potential suspects appeared one by one. But inquiries seemed to lead nowhere.
When I was interviewed by the police and asked where I was on certain days at certain times and who I was with, I referred to this diary, which they were quite surprised I had. But as you can see, every day has an entry in it. July 23rd, okay, so that was a Saturday, yeah. And, well, I went around my mum's all afternoon, and I went out with my friends, Jeff and Andy, and my mum and dad got back off holiday. There we are, how exciting is that? All the people I was with, the police actually went and checked them out and interviewed them and said, were you with David on the night of so-and-so? So, oh, well, if he says we were, then we must have been.
This afternoon, detectives visited the farmhouse home of Dr. Jones at Coggeshall in Essex. They searched an outbuilding and took away...
They exhausted every line of inquiry as far as a missing person and more. Nothing could have been done more, I don't think, to find her at that time.
As August turned to September, then into October, every search of the area had drawn a blank. And so the focus returned once again to Lee's farm and Robert Jones.
They dug up a lot of his garden, searched the house.
They also dug up the road outside Lee's farm. There was some suggestions some work had recently been done. So there's excavations conducted there. And there was also a complete search looking for evidence of assault or anything connected with Diane.
It was on October the 22nd, 3 months after she was last seen alive, that the horrific story of Diane Jones's fate became all too clear.
To me, it was very sad that she should come to such a horrible end. To think that she'd been lying there for so long.
In 1983, in the last week of the hottest July then on record, 35-year-old doctor's wife Diane Jones had vanished without trace from her home just outside the small Essex town of Coggeshall. The search had focused around the sprawling farmhouse where she and the doctor had lived. But 3 months later, a beater with a pheasant shooting party pushed his way through a patch of woodland a little over 30 miles away, near Ipswich.
The body of Mrs. Jones was discovered 30 miles away from her home, where she went missing in July. She was hidden in thick undergrowth in a copse near Ipswich. She died from severe head injuries. More than 100 police have been combing the area looking for a weapon.
Some shooters were going through the wood, and they found the body in a shallow grave in that wood. I was called that day, as soon as the body was found, to go up to that scene.
It was a missing person story. That changed very dramatically overnight when her body was found. Suddenly it became a murder inquiry.
I saw her in skeleton form. She still had her clothes on, but she had deteriorated quite a bit. The pathologist advised us to dig well under the body, to lift all the earth with the body. So we did that. She was dug up from that scene and taken to the mortuary at Cambridge.
Diane's gone missing at the end of July. We've gone all the way through the summer to October. We've had a very hot summer, we've had rain, we've had animals, so it wasn't possible to do a facial recognition. 2 days later, she was identified through dental records as being Diane.
The pathologist couldn't find any evidence of sexual attack. To murder somebody and leave her in a shallow grave in a wood in Suffolk, 40 miles from where she went missing, was strange without any sexual motive.
She was wearing the same dress that she was seen on the 23rd of July. That supports that whatever happened to her on that evening. Diane had 4 puncture wounds to her skull, which were quite odd, and they were a sort of a square indentation.
The pathologist asked me to get a load of tools. I went to a tool merchant and bought as many tools as I could. A few days later, he called me up. He said he'd tested all these tools, and it was definitely a slate hammer, a slater's hammer. A hammerhead on one side, and on the other arm, a sharp point, which you can imagine if it goes into a skull, it's going to crack through the skull immediately, because that was what it was made for in the first place, to go through slates and so forth. This was exactly the wound that was caused to Diane's head, which killed her. Now, we interviewed the gardener at Lee's farm, and he said there was definitely a slate hammer in the coal bunker, which wasn't there anymore after her disappearance. Dr. Jones said that he didn't remember anything about that slater's hammer, but the gardener definitely saw it there, and it was missing on her disappearance. That weapon was never found, and we never found the murder weapon.
The final news was horrible, awful. To think that she'd been there, lying there for so long.
But I remember when they found her, yeah. The news came through and I thought, my God. And I phoned up parents type thing. And he says, didn't you know? I says, no, I didn't.
It was a shock. When they just turn up dead, it hits you. My movements were covered, so I was kind of eliminated very, very quickly, really. And my first thought was, and it's still my thought today, my first thought went to speculating about who did it.
The inquiry seemed to be stalled, when all of a sudden, a clue emerged from the most unlikely source.
Focusing on that.
A group of men came to us who had gone past that very spot. They saw a Peugeot car parked there, and a chap in fawn clothing dragging something from the car towards where the body was eventually found. The driver said he remembered the man in fawn clothes, which Dr. Jones said he was wearing that night, and witnesses said he was wearing fawn or cream clothing.
They thought he was fly tipping, and the man was so intrigued by it, he wrote down the registration of the vehicle.
One of the passengers wrote that car number down on a magazine that he had with him. He kept it for a long while, that number, but about 2 weeks before her body was found, he unfortunately threw that number away.
The police were obviously very keen to recover the registration of the vehicle, so they employed a hypnotist to put the witness under hypnosis to try and recover that information.
A psychiatrist from the University of Surrey who'd worked with the police before on hypnosis cases. He came. I was present when he put these witnesses under hypnosis. The man who took the number said he remembered some of the number. GHK something something T. Dr. Jones's car was the same letters, and it was a Peugeot.
The driver of the vehicle could, under hypnosis, remember the number plate. But there was some concern that that detail of a vehicle had already been in the public domain in the newspapers. The danger was that that had already been revealed by the press what his registration was. So it was unsure how valuable it was.
They decided it couldn't be relied on because the car number had been publicised in the paper. I interviewed the witness, and you have to know the people, and I really genuinely thought that chap was genuine. I thought there was a genuineness about it. We were desperate to get that car number. We even traced where the paper would have been disposed of to a tip at Cambridge, which we went to and looked at. It was enormous. So we thought, well, there's no chance of ever finding that paper. But we did have a look at that.
Detectives made a further attempt to nail this evidence. Perhaps in writing the number, an impression was left on the paper directly underneath.
The number plate was really important because it potentially put an offender at the scene. We went through all the exhibits to see if, when he'd written the registration, there was a piece of paper underneath. We used the old sort of grey pencil trick to see if anything had any registrations on that would help us. And we did recover some detail, but not of the vehicle, unfortunately.
The most precious clue detectives had seemed to have ended up on a rubbish tip. But the pressure on them to find the killer was immense. This middle-class murder had the whole country talking.
The journalists zeroed in more than they would have done had it been, let's be frank, some poor unfortunate woman living in a council estate in Liverpool who'd been, gone down the pub and been murdered by a boyfriend there. It would have been of no consequence by comparison.
The papers couldn't get enough of the story. And it seemed like everyone had a theory about who Diane's murderer could be.
Mediums were phoning up and saying they had dreams about certain things that happened. People from all over the country, giving their versions and their thoughts and their ideas, but mere speculation, really. I remember one in particular, someone from a prison near Oxford, who wanted to confess to the murder. We interviewed him in prison, but there was no connection. It was completely publicity seeking. You must follow everything, but nothing ever concrete ever came to any of those other inquiries.
The evidence police had gathered was all circumstantial, nothing which seemed to put the case beyond reasonable doubt. But 3 weeks after Diane's body was found, they decided to act.
We didn't want to arrest Dr. Jones without investigating everything else first. But we decided there was enough evidence to arrest him and question him about all these things. The morning we went there, 6 o'clock in the morning, We said, "You're under arrest for," and cautioned him for the murder of your wife, Dr. Jones. He was quite cool. I've arrested murderers in my time. And he stayed very calm and collected all the way along for the interview.
Police went back to their earlier line of inquiry regarding the Jones family car, the one which Diane travelled in on the night she went missing. Robert Jones had sold the vehicle just days after Diane disappeared. And it had been sold with an empty grey woman's handbag still inside. Robert Jones was asked to explain.
He said it was the one that she had in the car. Other witnesses say it wasn't the one she had when she went to the pub that night.
There was a grey handbag found in the back of the car, and Robert Jones said that's Diane's. It was believed from several sources Diane had a brown handbag in the pub that night. So the bag that was found in the car wasn't the handbag she had at the time. Where is the brown handbag she had on the evening, and why is this grey handbag in the car?
The search of Lee's farm raised other questions about items which Diane always carried with her.
Diane's lighter was recovered, and her diary was also recovered, which didn't really add up. She would have had both those items in her handbag the night she went missing.
Then new evidence emerged. Detectives learned that Dr. Jones was preparing to leave Coggeshall alone.
Dr. Jones made inquiries of working abroad just before Diane went missing.
Dr. Jones did admit this. He had made inquiries before she disappeared about going to Australia to set up a new life without Diane. They had a different passport situation then. He had both names on the passport, his and Diane's. But he went to the passport authorities and removed her name from his passport. We questioned him about that as well. And he said, well, that was because I wanted to go on my own to Australia. So he was planning to break the relationship. Whether she was aware of that, I don't know.
The doctor of this picture postcard town in the home counties was being held on suspicion that he'd beat his wife to death. Gossip on the street, gossip in the press, was rising to fever pitch. Police would soon need to charge Dr. Jones or let him walk free.
We were just looking for the truth, that was all. But unfortunately, the truth kept coming back to Dr. Jones.
In October 1983, the 3-month search for Doctor's wife, Diane Jones, came to an end. Her body was found in a wood near Ipswich, with 4 deep head wounds from a spiked hammer. But police were struggling to identify the killer. All the evidence they had was merely circumstantial. And over 3 days of interrogation, Dr. Jones continued to protest his innocence.
We investigated every other possibility before we arrested him. We chased other information, but there was never any firm line of inquiry apart from Dr. Jones.
Dr. Robert Jones has been held here at Ipswich Police Headquarters since his arrest yesterday morning. No charges have yet been brought against him, but he's still helping police with their inquiries into his wife's murder.
Dr. Jones was arrested on 13th November 1983, and he was in custody for 3 days.
Eventually, when we'd exhausted our inquiries, we released him.
Dr. Jones' 55 hours in custody at Ipswich Police Station came to an end midway through the afternoon. A blue police van with darkened windows left the station with Dr. Jones inside. At the same time, the doctor's solicitor was heading towards the village of Coggeshall to rendezvous with his client at his Essex farmhouse. He then came out into the front garden along with his solicitor to answer reporters' questions.
How have you been treated, Dr. Jones?
Very well.
Do you think that, as far as you're concerned, the inquiry's over now?
No.
Is there anything else that you can help the police with?
I wouldn't have thought so. After now, there will be no further comment to be made, and we'd be grateful if you'd disperse.
Then I wrote a report to the CPS. We had to get permission on a case of this intensity and media coverage to see if they thought we had enough evidence.
It's not for the police to decide who's guilty and who isn't. They're simply an instrument for gathering all the available evidence. The file went to CPS to decide whether there was evidence to charge him for the murder of Diane. CPS will decide if there is a reasonable case to present to court. And CPS's view was there was not.
Dr. Jones had undergone 3 days of the most intense scrutiny. His story had been checked and rechecked. Nothing the police had gathered was enough even to charge him with the murder of Diane, much less convict him of the crime.
The public perception of arrest is that the person is responsible for whatever they've been arrested for. That isn't the case. An arrest doesn't mean a person is guilty of the offence.
Diane's inquest left open the question of who was responsible for her death.
Today, the coroner, Mr. Noel Watkins, recorded a verdict of unlawful killing by a person or persons unknown. The funeral for Mrs. Jones can at last take place at Tilby in Lincolnshire. Her funeral will come as a welcome relief, not only to her father, Mr. Sid Walker, but also to her husband, Dr. Robert Jones.
Diane's body was returned to the little Lincolnshire village where her life had begun. In the eyes of the law, Dr. Jones was blameless. But in many a household, tongues were wagging.
In Coggeshall, the gossip within that little town would have been, you know, and her husband's done it, you know, and he's a doctor. Of all the people to do a thing like that.
The suspicion went on and on. We can't ignore the facts, even though it could accuse us of tunnel vision. You can't ignore the facts of the case.
I'm the last person to have seen Diane Jones alive.
The man who says he saw the murderer at the scene of the crime.
I looked inside the car and there was a woman laying dead.
The other side of Diane Jones's life.
She wasn't a sex maniac. She certainly was a drink maniac. She wanted company and a good time, yeah, okay, absolutely.
Diane had a dilemma. Does she stay with her husband and lose her child, or lose her husband?
How almost 40 years later, police reinvestigate Diane's murder.
In 2021, we had some new evidence which we felt might change the opinion.
And how Dr. Jones took his secrets to the south of France.
Du tout, aucune connaissance de la vie en Angleterre. On avait l'impression, bon, la seule fois il m'a parlé de problèmes avec son ex-épouse, il m'avait dit ça me fait trop mal, je ne veux pas en parler.
A powerful thunderstorm hits a small Illinois town in the middle of the night when one of its wealthiest couples is shot to death as they sleep.
My parents were killed in bed.
This was clearly almost like a massacre.
It was a scene that will stick out in my mind and memory for as long as I'll live.
Detectives soon learn this royal family isn't what it appears to be.
They're
kind of a dysfunctional family, actually.
Will the storm hinder the investigation as detectives search for clues?
There were reports of powerful thunder and lightning, heavy rain, and even some high winds.
The weather is just so violent that all of that stuff would have been obliterated.
Or will it end up helping catch a killer?
The weather is definitely a factor in recovering sometimes key evidence.
An hour north of Chicago, Illinois, and just 5 miles west of Lake Michigan, sits the affluent village of Libertyville Township.
Libertyville, actually my hometown, was referred to as a sleepy little town, a nice community to raise your family.
The homes were upscale. Property values a little bit more, a lot of nice businesses, had a real hometown feel.
It wouldn't be unusual for people to not lock their doors. I mean, there was just very little crime. The usual, home burglaries occasionally, probably some juvenile mischief, things like that, but no very, very little violent crime, if any.
In fact, here the only thing that locals really concern themselves with is the weather.
It's not just the snowstorms and the winter. The summers can be real scorchers. That hot, humid air makes it all the way to the north from the Gulf of Mexico, and that just fuels powerful thunderstorms, especially June through August. That's when the region can see half of its annual total.
One such storm occurred in the first week of June 1980.
On that night, there was probably one of the most violent thunderstorms, rainstorms that we'd seen in that area for quite a few years.
But this storm would play a critical role in Libertyville's most infamous murder case. It's late at night when a severe thunderstorm approaches Libertyville.
It started, I think it was around probably, 10 p.m. or so.
This storm turned out to be significant. It came in from the west, it was a prolific lightning producer, and it also kicked up winds. Same time, unleashed heavy rain.
I mean, the sky just opened up and it broke loose. Lightning, thunder, wind blowing. It was very violent for a number of hours.
As dawn breaks, the storm system has moved on, and the day is bright and sunny. But the tranquility doesn't last long.
Libertyville Police? Yeah, this is Billy Rouse. My parents were killed in bed. We just noticed it. Where do you live?
As paramedics and police race to the location, they immediately recognize the home. It belongs to one of the area's most prominent couples, 44-year-old Bruce and 38-year-old Darlene Rouse. Bruce Lee Rouse was born in 1936 in Mundelein, Illinois, just west of Libertyville. His family had deep roots in the area, going back to the 1880s.
At one point, Bruce's father was a mayor, and they lived the American dream. I mean, they had the fancy cars, they had the beautiful home, they had the businesses going, a hefty bank account, so they didn't want for anything. They needed it, they went and they bought it.
They were well known throughout the area. The Rouses were probably among the top families in town.
In the late 1950s, Bruce met and married a beautiful girl from Libertyville named Darlene J. Stenland.
Like any young couple, they were in love. Bruce had ideas of becoming wealthy, and he worked hard at that.
Bruce bought a gas station in Libertyville, and in 1960, the couple welcomed a son, Kurt. 2 more children soon followed, Robin in 1963, and a year later, little Billy. Meanwhile, Bruce's business flourished.
Bruce owned several automotive repair shops, gas stations. throughout the Libertyville area. He also had an interest in a cable television network, many real estate holdings throughout the area also.
He had a gas station that was right in downtown Libertyville. Very successful business.
Although his gas stations kept him busy, Bruce also had other pursuits.
Bruce was an avid hunter, and he collected many rifles and shotguns.
He got along with people. He was just really respected as a businessman who worked hard and earned his money.
His wife, Darlene, enjoyed the life of a socialite.
Darlene never worked. She had her bridge clubs. She was active with the Chamber of Commerce and different social groups, so that took up most of her time.
In 1975, the family moved into a spacious 13-room colonial mansion in Libertyville, nestled along the Des Plaines River.
Their home sat on 8 acres. It was a massive house, indoor pool. They had a stable on their property, couple horses for the kids. They had the finer things in life. There's no question about that.
As the children grew up, Bruce and Darlene could afford the best for them.
Kurt, the oldest boy, and Robin both went private school called Lake Forest Academy, which is a very exclusive school. Kurt was a guard on the football team. He was a runner-up state champion in wrestling through Lake Forest Academy.
Robin was the apple of her dad's eye. There was no question that Bruce Rouse in particular was really very doting on Robin.
Billy, was pretty young. I know he played soccer.
There was never a want from any one of those kids. If they needed something, they had it.
The Rouses were a well-respected family in the community.
But now emergency and law enforcement are on the way to the Rouse house. When they arrive, 15-year-old Billy Rouse is in the kitchen with his sister, 16-year-old Robin.
Robin was absolutely hysterical, and she was pointing to the back of the house where the parents' bedroom was. Billy was talking on the house phone, and Kurt was nowhere to be seen at the time.
In the master bedroom, an unimaginable scene awaits them.
Someone had pulled the bed sheet up on the two parents. We did pull the sheet down.
Right away, they can tell that Bruce and Darlene have been shot in the face.
We saw the physical damage that had been to Darlene and to Mr. Rouse, and knew that immediately that there was nothing we could do. It was so horrific that I don't think anything like it had been seen before.
After a wild summer thunderstorm encompasses the area, police are about to find themselves in the middle of a murder investigation like no other, where the storm could hold the key to a killer's identity.
The storm was in the background of the whole thing.
Libertyville, Illinois police have just discovered the bodies of 44-year-old Bruce Rouse and his 38-year-old wife Darlene, shot to death in their beds after a torrential thunderstorm came through town the night before.
These type of nighttime storms in the Midwest can be pretty common over the summer. The storms are driven by strengthening winds aloft, and that can feed off a lot of really warm, humid air that can sustain itself even through the nighttime hours. They're also known to produce a lot of wind and a lot of lightning.
Homicide investigators from both Libertyville and Lake County Sheriff's Department arrived to the Rouse estate. In the kitchen, two of the Rouse children, Billy and his older sister Robin, appear in shock. They tell police their older brother, 20-year-old Kurt, is staying in a small house out back. After being escorted back to the main house, police break the news to Kurt.
He was stunned. Robin was screaming. And Billy was mildly detached.
As deputies take the children outside for questioning, investigators examine the crime scene, and it's nothing short of gruesome.
Mrs. Rouse had received a single gunshot blast to her head. It had literally removed from the top of the bridge of her nose all the way up in a Y pattern through her forehead. We know that it was an up-close shotgun blast, easily within 24 inches or closer.
It completely decapitated her, basically, and obviously from that shot being fired, it caused quite a blood stain in the home.
He had also received a gunshot blast to his lower mouth and chin area.
And it blew the jaw away, a lot of his teeth. In addition to that gunshot wound, he was bludgeoned in the head. We actually found some wood pieces from the butt of a gun still embedded in his head.
But the killer didn't stop there.
He was stabbed 6 times in the heart. So it was a gruesome crime scene.
Was this personal, or a home invasion gone bad? As police examine the rest of the home, it doesn't look like there had been a break-in.
There was no indications inside of muddy footprints that anybody had come from outside, inside. No foreign hairs, no foreign substances, no fingerprints.
But they do notice that some of Bruce's most valuable possessions are gone.
Mr. Rouse was a hunter. He kept all of his guns upstairs in the Rouse home, in a closet. All of the rifles, all of the shotguns.
There wasn't a gun left in that house, so we knew those were missing for sure.
Detectives hope the Rouse children can shed some light on what might have occurred.
3 different investigators attempted to interview the children separately. Billy, Kurt, they didn't show a lot of emotion. Robin was pretty hysterical.
But she manages to tell police about the previous night.
Robin was at a dance at her school that night, and she was with friends.
And she arrived home right around midnight. When she pulled into the driveway, Billy was out in the driveway in just a pair of blue jeans, no shoes or socks, no shirt or nothing. She asked Billy what he was doing.
She says Billy told her he was looking for matches in their father's car.
So Robin went in the home, thinking nothing of it, and didn't hear anything from that point on.
In the morning, she says one of her father's employees called the house looking for him.
When she went in to check on her parents, she could see that there was a lot of blood, and her parents had been somehow killed. She went, she told Billy.
Billy tells the investigators that he was out with friends the night before and got home around 10:30. He assumed his dad was already in bed. He says he was watching TV in the rec room on the 2nd floor when his mother came home around 11:30 p.m.
The master bedroom was on the 1st floor. Billy is on the 2nd floor just above them.
He says they spoke for about 5 minutes, and then she said she was going to bed. Billy says Robin came home when he went to get matches from his dad's car at some point.
He said Dad generally left his keys in the ignition of the car.
Then Billy says he came back in and fell asleep on the couch.
Billy said I didn't hear anything because there was a storm that night.
Billy says the next thing he remembers is being awakened at 9 a.m. by his sister, who was hysterical after finding their parents' bodies.
Billy looked at his parents and covered his mom and his dad up with a sheet. And called the sheriff's department.
When detectives speak with Kurt, he doesn't seem to know much more about his parents' murders.
Kurt said that he was with his girlfriend that night.
Kurt says after his girlfriend left at 11 p.m., he fell asleep. He says he only woke up once during the night from the loud thunderstorm.
Kurt had no indications, no knowledge as to what happened to his parents.
None of the children have any idea who would have done this. But before the interviews can continue, they are suddenly cut short.
Uncle appeared and admonished the kids and told them, "You're not talking to anybody till you talk to a lawyer." So that ended all questioning, period. of those children.
After the children are whisked away by relatives to meet with their attorney, detectives spread around the exterior of the Rouse home.
The police were looking for any type of evidence, whether it was blood droplets or whether it was footwear impressions that might have been left in the grass, on a sidewalk, in the gravel, in the dirt.
Unfortunately, the weather from the previous night has worked against them.
With the rain that was coming down, the way it was coming down, all of that stuff would have been obliterated. The weather was just so violent that it destroyed it.
But when investigators examine Bruce's car, a few things catch their attention.
The keys were not in the ignition where they usually are. They were placed in the visor of the vehicle, and the wipers were in the full-on position. So it was obviously used during a rainstorm.
To investigators, it's puzzling.
That didn't really make sense with the timeline.
Because when Father got home from work, it wasn't raining. The weather was clear.
Why would his windshield wipers have been used?
Someone else must have driven the car sometime during the thunderstorm.
Somebody got in that car and turned the wipers on and removed the keys from the ignition to above the visor.
But why wouldn't they have taken a car that was right there for the taking? You would think if somebody was robbing the house, they would take the car.
Investigators start to wonder if maybe the killer wasn't a strange robber.
It would lead me to believe that somebody that's close to that family had access to that car and drove it and brought it back.
But why? The vehicle is towed to be examined further as police canvass the area and speak with neighbors. But they all say the same thing.
They said, we could not have told the difference between the constant lightning and thunder that was going on throughout the night versus a gunshot.
As they wrap up the crime scene, detectives head to the medical examiner's office, hoping for a lead. When the autopsies are performed on Bruce and Darlene Rouse, it's clear Darlene was shot first.
They believe that Darlene died instantly, shot at close range in the head. Bruce woke up at the noise. And then Bruce was shot in the face. When Bruce was shot, he was shot from the side. Whereas when Darlene was shot, it was like right into the bed.
But that wound in itself would have not been enough to kill Bruce. If he would have received medical attention, he could have survived that.
Then they believe he was hit in the head with the barrel of the shotgun.
It was a very deep gash over the right eyebrow that actually caused a minor skull fracture. That also could have been treated, and Mr. Rouse could have survived that second wound.
But the final injuries proved fatal.
At the autopsy, they noted that there were 6 stab wounds directly into his heart. Each went into his heart.
I think, too, an investigator might suggest a crime of rage.
The pathologist estimates a time of death sometime in the early morning hours, which means all the children could have been home at the time.
The children didn't hear anything because there was a storm that night. That was their explanation.
At this point, the storm was probably still going strong. A heavy rain, it fell for the next hour, and it didn't stop for another half hour. Conditions finally calmed down again around 4:30 a.m.
With Bruce getting the most physical damage, investigators wonder if he was the main target.
The violence of the murder particularly of Bruce, where he was bludgeoned and stabbed, would have pointed more towards somebody who had a grudge.
As the people of Libertyville start locking their doors, detectives look into several new leads.
Perhaps this was a mafia hit.
The general consensus of the town was that Kurt was the killer.
Then, a key piece of evidence is discovered, thanks to the weather. Hours after a severe summer thunderstorm, the murdered bodies of businessman Bruce Rouse and his socialite wife Darlene are discovered by their kids. Locals in this quiet Chicago suburb of Libertyville are on edge.
It rocked the community. This respected family that lived in this small, very friendly community, suddenly wiped from the face of the earth. It really created a lot of anxiety and a lot of disturbance. Part of the concern of the community was that who did this? Why did they do it? Could other people be in harm's way? I mean, it really created a level of anxiety that you could imagine.
It was one of those things that was very unfortunate. Again, the basic reaction where the people couldn't believe that it happened. They were appalled. They were scared. Obviously, they were wondering if there was a killer running loose in their area. So the tensions were real high at that time.
As details of the murders spread, rumors swirl.
That Mr. Rouse was involved with the mafia, and that perhaps this was a mafia hit.
Bruce might have been involved, with the gangsters, and that the cable TV endeavor that he was involved in might have been a catalyst for someone to do harm to him.
I think that it was sort of normal for people to suspect that.
That turned out to be absolute nonsense. There was a rumor that Mrs. Rouse had a very domineering personality and that maybe she had offended somebody who then wanted to come back and do harm to her or to her husband. That turned out to be nonsense as well. But again, just an indication of the types of rumors that can be generated when people have more questions than answers in their minds.
There were suggestions in the community that this might be more of a family-related thing.
Many people think it had to be one of the Rouse boys, specifically 20-year-old Kurt Rouse.
Kurt had a very unusual look to him at the time. He had very long, flowing blonde hair that was kind of frizzed out. This was back in Charles Manson days. And Manson had that crazy look, the frizzed out hair.
The general consensus of the town was that Kurt was the killer because of the way that Kurt looked and his actions and the friends that he hung around with.
And when forensic results come back on the cars, investigators wonder if there's some truth to the rumors.
There was nothing in the vehicles during subsequent searches that was of any evidentiary value to us. No foreign prints, no foreign hairs.
Investigators know the killer had to be someone who had access to the house and cars, with a lot of anger towards the Rouses.
It was a lack of evidence that roused my suspicion more than anything. So it was pretty obvious to me that the focus was going to be on those children.
Unfortunately, police are still having a tough time speaking to them until they get an unexpected call. Two months after the murders, detectives hear from Billy's aunt.
Billy was now living with his aunt and his uncle. And the aunt called the lead detective in the case. And she said, Billy wants to see if he could help give you some additional information that could help solve this thing.
Detectives meet with the teenager, and he wants to look at some of the crime scene photos and discover more clues.
Billy talked to the police and pointed out some things that were missing, namely Darlene's purse.
And he looked at another picture and he said, the dresser here, my mom's jewelry box is missing from that dresser.
And he notes that the dressers have been pulled out. And he speculates that it looks like somebody might have been ransacking the dressers.
Could their original theory be correct?
Maybe this is a home invasion gone bad. Somebody was there to steal things of value, including a purse, money, jewelry, and the Rouses awoke during the course of this burglary, and then the killer turned weapons on them.
So we knew that we had some items that were missing from the house other than the weapons.
Although it still doesn't explain who drove Bruce's car and why it wasn't taken, which points to another theory.
In my mind, somebody made this look like a burglary. by taking those items. It was pretty obvious, at least it was to me, that there was no foreign intruder.
It was at that point in October that there was a new development.
Investigators finally catch a break when they get a call from a local surveyor. The man says he was out in the shallow waters of the Des Plaines River.
The Des Plaines River fluctuates greatly depending on rainfall.
After a higher than normal rainfall the previous month, October was actually drier than normal, and that means the water levels were pretty low.
That's a hot time usually in the Chicagoland area there. So the water wasn't deep as it normally would be. It was shallow enough he could walk the river.
He says that's when he stumbled upon something in the water.
He saw what he thought was a pipe sticking up. When he pulled up this pipe, he discovered that it was a shotgun. So a call was made to our department. We responded to that area with our divers from our dive team and continued to try to search the river.
After searching the river for days, police make a huge discovery.
A number of shotguns were recovered from that river, probably 5 miles from the home where the Rouses were killed.
There were approximately 11 or 12 of them, and all of those guns had simply been thrown into the river.
All the guns belonged to Bruce Rouse.
We were able to find Darlene Rouse's jewelry box, her wallet, with her driver's license. There was still money in her wallet. None of her jewelry was taken. It was all there.
If the person was actually stealing these things to get money, wouldn't they have taken the cash out of her wallet? Wouldn't they have possibly tried to use the credit cards?
Unfortunately, the river's water has eliminated any forensic evidence.
There was no evidence that was found on the weapons. There was no blood, fingerprints, anything that actually could have been found by forensic experts.
But the discovery does prove one thing.
It just backed up my theory that this had to be somebody that set this thing up to look like a robbery.
With no firm suspects, police circle back to the Rouse children. They were the only ones there the night their parents were viciously killed. And turns out, they are set to inherit a lot of money.
An insurance payoff, I think the police could have looked at that as a motive.
Mr. Rouse, had a very successful business.
His estate was probably worth over $3 million. And then, aside from that, he had a $900,000 insurance policy on him also. There was a lot of money to be gained by this. So, you couldn't rule that out.
As investigators look deeper, they learn the millionaire family was anything but perfect.
It was a family that had everything but had nothing.
And the weather has a hand in another tragedy that will stall the investigation for more than a decade. In October 1980, thanks to the recent dry month, investigators have discovered evidence in the Des Plaines River from the murders of Bruce and Darlene Rouse that proves robbery was not the motive.
Not only was it not a robbery, but it was somebody who was trying to make it look like a robbery.
And with the Rouse children inheriting their parents' estate and life insurance, could money have been the motive? It doesn't take long for investigators to uncover some dark family secrets.
They were kind of a dysfunctional family, actually. It was one of those types of families that just didn't get along.
Robin appeared to have the best relationship with her parents.
Robin, the daughter, was kind of more of a model student.
The oldest, Kurt, however, had been on the outs with his parents for several years.
Kurt was recognized more as a counterculture sort of character.
Kurt started hanging around with peers that got into the drugs and didn't get along with his parents at all.
But shockingly, of the 3 children, 15-year-old Billy was most problematic for his parents.
Billy had his problems with authority. Billy was getting into trouble with the schools and doing some vandalism.
Billy was responsible for severely damaging 3 schools in the Libertyville area. The rest of Billy's education was in alternative schools.
Billy was constantly yelled at by his parents or left to his own devices.
Dad with the business, Mom with her social events, so Billy started the old drug scene, drinking, and this is at 15 years of age because they didn't pay attention to him. He was a troubled young man.
Investigators start to narrow their focus.
Even though people thought Kurt did it, the more we looked into it and the more that we were able to definitely trace his activities and where he was at through friends and his girlfriend, that he was nowhere near that house.
Robin had been at a school dance, and there was really no evidence that suggested she was involved.
What does that leave? Billy, who lives in the house, who has access to all of these things in the house, who's always being, scolded for his behavior.
Police want to follow up with the children, but are blocked at every turn.
There was a grand jury that was obviously convened at the time, but all 3 of the children took the Fifth Amendment and would not testify. So the investigation kind of stalemated. They always had a lawyer. You could never talk to them.
There was very little physical evidence that was allowing the police to go further.
During the next 2 years, the children inherit proceeds from the Rouse estate and Bruce's life insurance.
Anything that those kids wanted, all they had to do was call the lawyer and they got it. It's that simple.
Kurt moves out west, while Robin attends college in Wisconsin. Billy continues to live with relatives. More than a decade later, investigators get a surprising call from police in Florida about Billy Rouse.
Billy, in 1984, he moves to Key West, Florida. I was keeping tabs on him through the Key West Police Department.
Through the years, Billy's desire for self-indulgence only increased.
It was a life of partying and drinking and smoking your way through a lot of money.
Billy was spending probably around $20,000 a month on alcohol and drugs that he was feeding to his friends.
Until all the money ran out.
He hung around all the seedy bars in Key West, Florida. He had no income. He had gone through every bit of his inheritance. It was gone.
That's when he gets arrested.
We got a telephone call from Key West that Billy had been a lookout in a bank robbery.
With Billy in custody, investigators believe now is the time to make a move.
There's not going to be any better opportunity than to try to go down and see if we can talk to this kid. So I rustled up a couple of our detectives that worked on the case, and we flew to Key West.
Investigators meet with the now 31-year-old as he sits in a Florida jail.
I said, Bill, isn't it time to put those demons to rest?
Shockingly, he agrees.
Billy then gave his statement on tape as to what had happened.
According to Billy, on the night of June 5th, 1980, he came home after partying with friends.
He says when he walks into the house, his mom is in the kitchen. She confronts him.
She walked up to me and says, "You smell like liquor." I said, "Yeah, what about it?" Okay. And she says, "Yeah, don't worry about it. You're going to be shipped out to military school. I'm just over it. You're going to be just like your brother. You moron."
He had the most deep-seated hatred for his mother. He said, all she does is rag at me all the time. After being admonished by his mother, he went up to the rec room, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and smoked the joint.
That's when he decides enough's enough.
I decided I was going to get rid of my mom.
So he pulls out his dad's shotgun from the closet and started wiping it down and cleaning it while he's thinking about it. And decided that he was going to do this. He went into this kitchen and he grabbed a knife out of the drawer.
It's now after midnight. There's a horrendous lightning storm going on. There's nobody else in the house except Billy his mom, and his dad.
He went to his parents' bedroom and watched them sleep for a moment.
Okay, go ahead. So what did you do then? So I walked in the room, took the 16 gauge, put it up to her head, and the trigger went off. And I don't remember pulling it, but the trigger went off.
I don't know whether you would call that like a defense mechanism, or you can't bring yourself to say, I killed my mother. So you say the gun went off.
Then what did you do then? Well, my dad sat up real quick, looked at me, and the trigger went off again.
He said his father falls back on the bed and he starts convulsing. Billy goes around to his dad's side of the bed now, and he takes the butt of the shotgun and he hits his dad in the head as hard as he can.
I don't know how many times I had in my head, but that didn't work. He was still. And I didn't want him in misery. So I grabbed the knife and I stabbed him until he quit moving.
Although not planned, the storm actually worked in Billy's favor.
If anybody would have heard it, it didn't hurt, because he wasn't that far away from the home. But with the violent weather that we had there, I mean, it was so loud. Any type of a shotgun or a gun going off, there's no way you could have heard it.
Afterward, Billy says his mind was racing.
I figured, man, why'd I do this, man? I gotta do something, man. I'm going to prison.
Billy says he cleaned himself up and tosses his clothes in a garbage bag.
I went back to their room, and I figured I'd make it look like a robbery.
He then takes the jewelry box. He takes the purse. He then pulls out the drawers to make them look like they're being ransacked. He then steals all the rifles and shotguns, and he thinks, I'm gonna get rid of this stuff.
After stashing them in the trunk of his dad's car, Billy is surprised by Robin when she comes home.
What did you say? Well, so brother came out to get some matches. So those other matches, I knew Dad had them in his car.
After Robin went to bed, Billy says he drove to the river just as the heavens opened up.
It was coming down in sheets.
And he said the winds were so high and the rain was blowing sideways, there was nobody on the road. And he said he had no concern whatsoever that anybody was going to be driving by and seeing him unload this stuff into the river.
Billy says then he came home and went to bed. He says he doesn't regret killing his parents, but he's tired of living with it.
Man, it's eaten me up 15 years. I don't really don't give a about my life right now. Look at the way I've lived.
Billy Rouse is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and is extradited back to Illinois. In 1996, 16 years after the murders of his parents, he goes to trial. Despite his confession, Billy pleads not guilty.
Of course, his defense was that the confession was coerced. It was not very believable. We all sat there and watched the videotape. The courtroom was fairly riveted. You could hear a pin drop.
On August 10, 1996, Billy is sentenced to 80 years in prison and will be eligible for parole in the year 2035.
He had to be sentenced under 1980s law. And the law at the time was that he could only get a maximum of 40 years on his mother's homicide and 40 years on his father's homicide.
Although finally solved, the case of the Rouse murders continues to haunt the people of Libertyville.
I think it's a lesson to us all. I feel sorry for the Rouses. Any of us who have had kids know that it can be a rough road. And to have it end in such a horrific manner is really a tragedy.